This is the standard TinyHawk rebuild that I'm doing at the moment. So it's got an upgraded VTX as well as an upgraded receiver and various other modifications. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to take you through the rebuild and show you all of the parts I'm using and how they actually fit into the frame. Okay, so the first thing we'll go through is the video transmitter. Right, what I'm using is the Zeus Nano. So this is a 350 milliwatt transmitter. And on this one I'm using an Axie Lumineer Pro antenna. On the new build I'm going to be using this, we can see it there, okay, the iFlight Sigma. Okay, so that's the video transmitter. With the receiver I'm using tracer. Okay, so we're going to wire up the tracer, and we've also got a little sled here for mounting the tracer receiver. Okay, so we're going to look at how to mount that. Next thing we've got is the upgraded camera. So I'm using the Foxy Razor Nano. This is a 16:9 camera, and I like the quality of this camera. It gives a good image. Another thing we're doing, you can see I've actually got the skids on the bottom there, and this is the skid here. It's just basically you just download it and print it. It's a TPU, and we'll be mounting them on as well. The frame I'm going to be using, I've got a broken frame here, which I've just smashed up, so I'm going to actually be using a brand new frame and putting all the components on, and we're going to have a look at how we do that. So I use a different way of mounting the flight controller on the board here. I actually use custom 16mm screws front and back and 10mm screws on the side, and I mounted a bit lower, so it's lower down and we've got more room to fit things in. Okay, we'll have a look at this. Alright, so here we are with the frame. So once again, the 16mm screws go front and back, and then we've got the 10mm screws which are going to go on the side here. And then I just use M2 nuts straight on top of the frame. So we'll put this on. I'll fast forward through the longer bits, so it won't take so long. And we'll just put the frame together, Alright, so there's the frame done. We've got all the screws mounted on the frame, 16 front and back and 12mm on the side. Let's have a look at that. Okay, so this is how I like to set it up here. I put the bolts through, and I put the M2 nuts straight on top there, and then the flight controller actually just sits straight on top of there. Okay, that's all set up, ready to go. Let's have a look at the flight controller. Okay, so the flight controller is already wired up here. Now I'll just go through and explain a few things. Okay, here we go. Alright, so the various wires we've got here. Okay, this is where the video transmitter used to be, on this side right here. Okay, here we go. So this is the original image of the flight controller. There's the video board there, and that's been taken off. Now, importantly, what we're using is this 5-volt and the ground here, and also the smart audio and the VTX signal over here. So we're using both of those. We're using the buzzer on this build. I've actually got a buzzer on the back there, and we're also using the positive and negative here. But we're actually, because I'm setting up tracer, if I go back to the bottom of the board, here we go. On the bottom of the board, we're actually using the RX and TX pads. That's because we're setting up tracer. Okay, so just have a look at that, how it looks on the board here. Okay, so this is where the video transmitter is being removed. We've got our video and smart audio and 5-volt, and that's actually going to be used to power the new VTX. Okay, this lead here, remember these are the buzzer. Okay, so this lead coming back here goes to the buzzer, which you can see mounted there. I've got a custom mount, XT30 mount there. And if we turn it over, you can see the TX-RX coming from the side of the board here and here. That's what I'm using for the tracer receiver. And then right here near the S bus output, which is right there. I'll get these out of the way. Okay, right here you can see I'm taking 5 volt positive and negative here from the S bus connectors. That's the power of the receiver as well. Okay, one other thing I've done is I've actually moved the capacitor sort of over here. I've actually resoldered it a bit, so it's over this way. Okay, so we'll just mount that straight on the board. Okay, so this actually lowers the flight controller board down a little bit because this goes straight down onto the 2 nuts there, and you can see it's actually quite low. Okay, it's still it doesn't get any vibrations. It's still okay. Okay, so we'll just mount all of this. Now I always use a little bit of Loctite, okay, on all the joints. Okay, so whenever you're putting a nut on, especially if it's something holding a flight controller on or something like that, always use some Loctite. This is the Loctite 243. This is the one that you can actually remove with a bit of force. Okay, so I like to just put a little bit on the board there. Okay, if you can see there, we just transfer a little bit on with the matchstick, just onto the thread, just there, and then we're all good to put the screw on. The bolt, the nut. There we go. Okay, with the nut, just tighten it down so it's finger tight. Okay, don't actually screw it down too hard because remember you're just pushing on the rubber grommets there. Okay, next side here. Alright, so at this stage we've got the flight controller board mounted. Okay, and we've got the nuts on there, and you can see at the front and back we've still got ample of thread here. Okay, on the bolt, and to mount the VTX is going to go on the back here, and the receiver is going to be on the front here. Okay, so at this stage I like to bolt the motors in place, and also put the skids on, just basically just to hold the wires in place so they don't move around and actually get broken at the joints here. So that's what we'll do next. Right, so now with the motors on, we're not actually going to tie down the wires yet. We're just going to leave them. The next thing that we're going to look at is actually mounting the video transmitter, and that's going to go on the back here. Okay, let's have a look. So it's going to go on this bolt here at the back. One thing we're going to use, I'm going to use a 4mm hex spacer. So that's going to go on there to add a bit of height, and then the video transmitter is going to go on top. Okay, so we'll just put this one on, and we'll just have a look at the process of putting the VTX on. Okay, so you can see there, let's get some focus. Okay, so you can see there the 4mm spacer has gone on. Okay, that just gives us a little bit of air gap between the flight controller board and the VTX. So the VTX is basically going to be mounted upside down, this way up. Okay, I'll just make sure I've got my wires out of the way first. These wires need to go through here. So these wires and these wires here are the ones that are actually going to connect to the VTX. These ones here are for the receiver. Okay, so the VTX goes on there. Okay, just make sure the wires are all through and out of the way. Okay, so once again, before we mount it, because we're only mounting this on one pole of the we don't have two bolts to mount it on, so I'm going to use plenty of Loctite, and we're going to actually, the reason we used a threaded hex bolt on here, hex spacer, and not just a round spacer, is because we're actually going to screw down on top of that, and we want to keep it nice and tight so it won't actually rotate around. Okay, a little bit more Loctite on there. I try and get a little bit of Loctite on the board as well if I can, just to adhere the nut to the board too. Right. Okay, so I'm just going to use my starter tool here. Get this one started on. There we go. And just finish off with the pliers. Okay, so just be really careful as you're doing this that you don't actually destroy any of the components on the board itself, like the little button there. I'm just going to tighten that down fairly tight. Okay, just so I'm confident that it won't actually move. There we go. Right, so with that all mounted, we're ready to start soldering. Right, so if we have a look at that here, we've got the RX. This is smart audio. It's actually Tramp, sorry. So this is Tramp. We've got our video, and then we've got 5 volts in ground, and then we've got the spare 5 volt in ground. We're actually not using that at the moment. You can see on mine, I've actually disconnected these two and all of the ones up the front here. Right, so the one furthest towards the back here, you can see it actually says there RX. So I like to use a pair of tweezers just to get this held in the right position. Get a little bit of solder here. Try and put a little bit of extra solder on if I can. Trying to get a nice blob there, a nice round blob. You don't want anything sticking up that's going to get caught on the battery strap. So that looks fairly good. Now I like to use just a little magnifying glass just to take a good look at it. Okay, that looks good. Just for the camera there, I always use a magnifying glass or something just to zoom in. It's actually a little bit close to the other one. It needs to move up a little bit, doesn't it? So we're just going to resolder it and see if I can move it upwards a little bit. Okay, so we'll take another look at that. It looks a lot better. That's good. Okay, next one is the video wire. So this is coming from the flight controller board. Okay, that's the video wire there, and once again looks quite good, solder joint. Okay, then we're using the positive and negative. Okay, so first of all we got 5 volts. So remember, these are the ones coming off the board. These are the connected to the original place where the original VTX was attached to. Okay, so this one's coming up here, the 5 volt. Okay, that looks good, I can see that easily. And then the ground wire. There we go, I just need to check on that with the magnifying glass. Okay, if you're not happy with the solder joint, just go for it and do it again. It's worth taking your time and getting the solder joint right until you're happy with it. Okay, let's take another look at that. Okay, I like that one there. Alright, this is a really good video transmitter. I like this transmitter. It's also got the audio, which is a real bonus. Okay, so that's the video transmitter mounted. The next thing we're going to look at, so if you look here, okay, here's the back here, and that's mounted on that bolt right there at the back. Moving forward, we're going to mount the receiver here. Okay, so for the receiver mount, we're going to be using a spacer once again. This time, I'll split it here so we can see it. Okay, so there's a 3mm spacer, and once again it's an M2 threaded spacer. So we'll just put that one on. Okay, so this is just to lift the sled up a little bit that holds the tracer receiver, just to keep it up away from the flight controller board. Okay, once again, because we're only using one mounting point, so I like to have a threaded spacer underneath, and that way I can actually just screw down tight the nut, and actually even put some lock thread on there. Okay, just to keep it all in place. Okay, so you can see that goes down there like that. Okay, so there it is there. That's our sled in place. Just going to tighten it down. Alright, so let's take a little bit of a look at that. Go up a little bit. Alright, so if we have a look from the side here, you can see underneath the VTX here, we've got plenty of room for airflow there, and none of the, for example, the buzzer leads here are not actually forced down onto the flight controller board, which is right here. And then if we look at our sled here, once again, ample room underneath there, and it's not actually going to touch the flight controller board, and then the receiver goes on top. Right, so the way I like to hold the receiver on is with a little bit of heat shrink. So we just cut a piece here, and it's a little bit awkward to get on. So we just slide it. It's actually going to go underneath the sled there, and then we'll put the receiver on. Okay, so there we go. We've got it there. So I tend to actually mount everything before I wire it up. I just find it easy to wire it after it's been mounted. Okay, you can see it's actually coming back and covering the connectors a little bit, which we don't want. Okay, so we'll just remove it and make it a bit shorter. Okay, and that's how we're going to mount the receiver on. So just a little bit of heat there. Right, so that's all ready to be wired up. Okay, so these wires from the side here, remember this is the original two wires. These wires are coming from the S-bus, and these two wires are coming from underneath the board. That's the TXRX because we're using tracer. Okay, so we'll just connect the wires, solder the wires up. I might just fast forward through this and then come back and show you when it's finished. Alright, so we're just going to lay those wires down there as best we can. You might notice I've also put another piece of heat shrink here. So this heat shrink is to actually slide up over the connectors that we've just soldered. Now this area here, this is where the battery strap runs through. So we don't want that catching on any of these connectors. So we're just going to move this up. Okay, and that's going to be just shrunk over there. And that's going to keep them protected. Right, so at that point we've now got the video transmitter and the receiver all mounted on there. Okay, one thing I'm going to do is actually mount the antenna. Okay, so this I'm using a custom hard mount here for the battery connector, the XT30 battery connector. So this actually attaches on top of the frame mounts, of the hex frame mounts, and it just keeps the battery wires secure and out of the way of the props. I just think it's easier. That's actually a design. That's one I designed myself. You can purchase that on the website if you want. Okay, so there we go. So that's going to be mounted on there, and we'll actually clip that on a bit later. I'm just going to move that back a little bit. So just to keep that in nice and secure, I'm just going to put a little bit of super glue on there. I use heat shrink. You can see I've put extra heat shrink on here just to give it more strength. It takes a bit of a beating in crashes, so if you can just put a little bit of heat shrink around it, and you'll notice I've actually put more heat shrink up here just so it doesn't bend at the top there. Okay, so that'll go down there and dry. Okay, so the next step, before we move on any further, what we want to do is actually put the frame standoffs in place. Okay, so if we have a look at the frame standoffs now, the original standoffs, and in fact all the parts for the original frame were plastic. I'm using these ones. Okay, so these ones here, if we just have a look. Alright, these ones here are actually alloy. Okay, they're same height, they're 15 millimeters, but they're actually alloy. And all of the standoffs I'm using on this frame are alloy ones. Okay, so we're going to put those four in so we can route our wires, our motor wires around those, and then we'll continue on with the next part. Alright, so now the frame standoffs are in place, and we can just gently route the wires around them. We're not going to attach the wires with cable ties at the moment, but we'll just get them in the right position. Okay, in particular the front ones here, they need to be lifted up a little bit because they're actually coming through a gap in the back of the camera sides, the camera mount. The ones at the back here will just be mounted down onto the frame. Okay. Now I always like to mount the camera at about 30-degree angle. That's the way I like to fly. This camera here, this is the Foxeer Razor Nano. So it's a 16 by 9. It's PAL. I find it gives the best image, clearest image. One thing I like to do is also to put conformal coating on the back of the camera, and especially around the edges here as well, just to give it a bit more protection. So this Foxy Eraser Nano, you can't just attach this to the TinyHawk. You need a special connector. You can see I've wired up a special connector here. It's got the Molex connector on one end here, and the JST-SH, which connects to the flight controller board on the other end there. So if you're going to use this camera, just keep in mind that you'll need a special connector. And I actually do sell these on my website with that connector included if you want to buy one. Okay, so I'm just going to set this at approximately 30 degrees, and we'll go into that later and do it properly. Okay, so the first thing to do is to actually feed this through and get the connector in place. So just plug that in. I really don't like it when they use connectors for cameras on flight control boards. It's much better to hard solder them. The TinyHawk has a connector, so that's all we can do. Okay, now the best way I'm using tracer, and if you're using tracer and you've got these sorts of antennas, the antennas actually come, I have them crossed over, so you can see the left is going to the right and the right is going to the left, and they're actually coming out, they're actually bundled with the motor wires here. So they're actually coming out through this little gap here at the back of the camera, and that's actually quite difficult to get in place, to get all of the motor wires and these in place at the same time. Okay, and I've just realized that the connector actually needs to go underneath here. If you're not putting the camera at 30 degrees, if you've got it much lower, you might not need to do that. Okay, with my camera angle, I do need to do that. Okay, there we go, everything in place. Right, so with the camera now mounted, okay, next thing to do, we'll do the antenna later. We'll actually do them when we're doing the tie clips for the motor wires. So the next part we need to do is at the back here. We're just going to attach the antenna. Sorry, okay. Right, here we go. All connected up. Okay, so the next part is just to put the top plate on. Make sure the holes line up there. Alright, the top plate's in place. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead and we'll put the battery strap on. And I'll feed this through here, and you can just have a look. Maybe we can see how much gap we've got. If we have a look there, you can see there's a fair gap, but it does actually slide on those connectors there, and that's why we put the heat shrink over the connectors. Okay, so battery strap attached. Right, with that done, the next thing to do is actually address these antenna. Okay, and they're actually going to go underneath here, and I might just pause the video and I'll get them strapped on, and then I'll show you where they've actually been routed. Alright, so looking a bit more like a TinyHawk, let's turn it over and have a look at how the wiring has gone with the tracer system there. Okay, so here we go. Let's have a look from this angle here. Right, so you can see we've got the tracer antenna wires coming out through here with the motor wires. It actually goes down over the front of the arm here. Okay, round underneath the arm, and then it just coils around here. We've got a tie clip here, and this is actually mounted hard up against that the skid there. Okay, and that's how the tracer antennas are mounted on. So there we go. That's my preferred upgrade for the TinyHawk Freestyle. We've got the upgraded VTX, 350 milliwatt VTX, and tracer on there as well. And that's it, ready to go.